questions. I know that there has been, hello, YouTube. I'm live on YouTube now, so this is weird. I'm going to be live on TikTok and on YouTube, and like my phone is over here and my computer is over here, and so the two of them at once is just going to be interesting. Anyway, so I was doing these weekly, typically do these weekly in the winter when things are a little slower and I don't have markets all the time. But I'm going to try and do them both at the same time. And wow, my camera quality is so much better on my phone than it is on my computer. I probably need to get some sort of a webcam on my computer, but it is what it is. So if you're on TikTok and you're joining and you don't know who I am Shelby, the cricket lady. I raise crickets for human consumption and turn them into tasty alternative protein snacks. And YouTube, sorry, I'm live on TikTok as well at the same time. So if it seems like I'm switching back and forth, it's because I literally am switching back and forth. Either side though, TikTok or YouTube, if you have a question, drop it in the respective chats. Happy to answer it. If you're mean, I won't answer your question. I'm sorry. Hello to all the wonderful people on the internet, and hello to all the people who are not wonderful on the internet too. But anyways, okay, so let me pull up some of my comments from the last, I looked at my thumbnails, and my last live video that I did on YouTube was June 19th. So it's been a while. I know I promised that I was going to do them, but things got busy. So anyway, I do know that I have a few questions though about, man, there's a lot of people that like invite me to go live together on TikTok. I don't know what that means. I'm such a TikTok noob. Anyways, let me get off of the not responded, and I will not be responding or talking about questions where people were jerks, because I did have a whole bunch of people obviously come at me and tell me how awful I am about trying to force people to eat bugs and part of the New World Order and blah, 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 blah. Not the case. Anyways, let's start at the top. 2 days ago. In what/how do you get your crickets to lay eggs successfully? Do I have a video for that? So I do have a video for focused on breeding, egg laying, egg hatching, incubation, all of that stuff. I think there's a 3-video series, and each of those videos is like pretty in-depth. It's half an hour each. Go check those out. It's part of a playlist, and I want to say, I'm trying to think of what it is called. Let me see if I can pull it up. I want to say it's like expanded version. Yeah. How to breed crickets, hatching pinheads, extended version, how to breed crickets, extended version, how to breed crickets, incubation, all of that. So that's a 3-video series. Go check that one out. That's where I would totally start on the actual laying of the eggs, raising the crickets, all of those things. Those 3 videos, like I said, half an hour each, is an hour and a half of like really hands-on, shows you exactly my setup, exactly what I do, tells you some of the pitfalls of people not seeing success with the actual laying of the crickets, why that's not working, some things to troubleshoot. More often than not, the reason people don't see their crickets laying eggs is because they're probably too early. Though when you're breeding crickets, many people, their leading indicator is actually the male crickets chirping. That is a good indicator that your crickets are mature and that things are, progressing, and maybe you need to put breeding trays or something to collect the eggs from the females in there if the males are chirping. But typically speaking, if the males are chirping, you're still too early. You need to watch your females. When the females look fully mature, in other words, when they have a fully formed ovipositor, that's when you can really start thinking about putting your breeding trays in there. You'll see better success of the females laying eggs if you wait for them to be ready. That would be where I would go, though, for the videos. And then at that point, it takes a few rounds. But once you really get the feel of when it's time to put the breeding trays in, you will never again have a problem with getting baby crickets to hatch. It's, I'd say, one of the easier things to do. Next question. What are the dimensions of your bins, and how many crickets do you have per bin? So if you've ever seen the videos with my farm, I have these big plastic gray totes, just shelves and shelves of them. They're 50-gallon Sterlite brand, just storage totes. They did go through a redesign from the original version, but they're still 50 gallons. They don't quite fit the egg flats as well as they used to. So in peak cricket growing time, we can usually raise up to about 10,000 crickets in one of those 50-gallon bins. In the winter, we struggle a little bit. It's more like 5,000. But in the summer, you can hit closer to 10,000. I would say if you're looking at starting up a farm and trying to calculate how many crickets you think you can or will have in a bin, I would suggest that you go on the lower end of that and assume that you're going to get 5,000 per bin, because for a while, that's probably what you're going to get. And/or for a while, that might be slightly aspirational. So 50-gallon bins, you can use whatever you have available to you, though. It doesn't need to be what my dimensions are, but that's just what we use. And then, like I said, good rule of thumb, and I've said it in another video before. I don't know if I've said it on a live. Pretty sure I put it in another video. Good rule of thumb for cricket farming in terms of the amount of crickets you want to determine that will go into your, whatever bin you're going to select. So let's say that you don't have access to a 50-gallon bin. You have access to a 25-gallon bin. A rule of thumb would be 0.6 pounds per square foot of growing space. So, for example, if you have, if you have 10 square feet of growing space, then you would, 0.6 times 10 is 6, right? Seems right. Mental math, not my strong suit. Anyways, so whatever your growing square footage dimensions in your bin, multiply that by 0.6 pounds per square foot. That's a pretty good general rule. Once you hit that 0.6 per square foot hurdle, start trying to push it to a pound per. And if you get really good, maybe you can hit over a pound, pound and a half, something like that. But I would shoot for that 0.6 pounds per square foot to start. That's just what I would do. Next question. Thanks for these videos. You're welcome. How long can cricket eggs be stored before one has to incubate and hatch them? Could I keep them dry and cool for a few months to a year? Also, how do you transfer the pinheads to another container without getting pinheads everywhere? Good question. So how long can cricket eggs be stored before one has to incubate and hatch them? So this, when you say this, you're saying not at optimal conditions, obviously. So you're not actually looking at incubating them. You don't want to hatch them. Typically for us, when we are incubating cricket eggs, we usually incubate them for about 11 days, and then we have them successfully hatch. You can extend that by manipulating the temperature. So if you cool things down, so for example, we like to incubate at roughly 90 degrees, 87 to 90 degrees. The lower the temperature, the longer the incubation duration is going to be. So I've done slight trial and error, very non-scientifically. If you freeze them for an extended period of time, they are not going to hatch. If you freeze them for a day, they might hatch. The best advice I can give you is cool them to about 73 degrees or so, and that can give you 3 weeks until hatch. I've not done anything longer than that because partly I'm afraid to. One thing in this question, can I keep them dry and cool for a few months to a year? You dry them out, they will become non-viable. So no, you cannot dry them out. It will not work. So whatever you do, please don't dry your cricket eggs out and expect them to hatch. It's just not going to happen. You need to keep them moist. But if you want to buy yourself a few weeks, you can. You just need to cool them down. So keep them at like 70 something degrees as opposed to 90 something degrees, and you will extend that incubation time. Oop, sorry, kicked the dog accidentally. He's right under my feet. Sorry, buddy. So yeah, and then how do you transfer the pinheads to another container without getting pinheads everywhere? Inevitably, you're going to get pinheads everywhere. It's just kind of what happens. Ideally, you end up good enough at this that you have extra pinheads anyways. It's one of those things, as you get the feel for it, it becomes much easier, and producing pinheads is, like I said, one of the easiest things once you get the hang of it. There's been very few rounds, save like something catastrophic happening, like things got too hot, things got too dry, something like that. All conditions being what they're supposed to be, I always end up with extra pinheads. So speed is of the essence when dealing with pinheads, but also just understanding that you are going to end up with them all over. Part of the reason why I don't ever really recommend raising crickets in your house, especially not at scale. I get that, like, for some people who are keeping them for their reptiles and things like that, it's really the only way to do it. I do understand that. But you're going to get them everywhere. It just is what it is. Okay. I have a question in my chat from YouTube. I have 3-week-old pinhead crickets thanks to your YouTube videos, but they haven't grown very much. I have been feeding them potato, apple, and oats, and I'm thinking it might have to do with the temperature. Okay. So you are probably spot on in terms of with the temperature being the issue. Temperature, crickets and their maturity are incredibly impacted by temperature. You can speed them up, you can slow them down. If you are, I would have a lot of follow-up questions to you, like what temperature are you keeping them at? If you are keeping them around 75 degrees or so, I would guess that temperature probably is the culprit of why they are not developing. Just by the list of what you are feeding them as well, potato, apple, and oats, I would really encourage you to get some sort of a protein source in there, like complete protein source. Depending on what you're using them for, like if you're using them to feed to an animal, you have a little more leeway. You can use things like cat food and stuff like that. If you are raising them for your own consumption, I would recommend a non-medicated chick starter with some meat in it, or even if you can get some sort of a powdered meat or something like that. Otherwise, you are going to notice as they grow, they might start eating each other because crickets are opportunistic omnivores. They do need some form of animal protein, and if you don't give it to them from an outside source, they will just start eating each other because it's just how they work. So my guess is if you are anywhere in the 70s with your temperature, you're probably right. They're probably not maturing because the temperature is too low. If you are able to crank that up a little bit, you should see them grow more, mature faster, all of those things. Otherwise, you're just going to be looking at a longer timeline. They will mature. It'll just take longer. So for us at 87 degrees, it's a very predictable 45-day cycle. You bump that up by 1 or 2 degrees, and you are dropping that cycle down to like 40 days or less. The fastest I've ever turned crickets is 29 days, but it was warm in there. And there's a lot of other factors at play that I just am really not comfortable with running the heat that high all the time. There's just too many other things that can go wrong that it just makes it really complicated. Okay. Next question. Hi, how do you feel about using them to feed children? And do you ship? You're very welcome. Thank you for watching. How do I feel about feeding them to children? If the kids want to try them, happy for them to try them. How do you feel about feeding anything to kids? It's a great source of protein. The only caveat I would have with feeding them to anyone is that they are the same family as shrimp and lobster and other shellfish. So if you have, feed them to chicken. Oh, to chickens. I was going to say to children's. You can feed them to kids too. But the chicken, yeah, you can feed them to chickens. It's actually really good for them, good supplement for them, especially in the winter. Um, typically chickens in the summer, if they're backyard chickens, they're foraging insects and doing all that. It's all good. Don't worry about it. Typically in the winter, they don't have as much access to any sort of insect because they're just dormant or dead. So for egg health and all of that kind of stuff, being able to supplement them to chickens is a good idea. The other thing that you could raise yourself to feed to your chickens that are actually easier to raise are mealworms. The one thing with mealworms, though, is if you want them a little higher protein and a little less high in fat, which I don't really necessarily know if that's a concern for your chickens. Mealworms are going to be higher in fat than crickets because anything in a larval stage is going to be higher in fat. So yeah, you can totally feed them to chickens. It's one of those, we source our eggs locally from a farmer, and anytime that I have just some extra, which I don't typically have very many, but if I have any extra laying around, we take them to the chickens, and those are it. Yeah. LOL, she fed it to my kids at the fair. Probably did. I had a lot of people try the crickets at the fair, at the Iowa State Fair. And so, yeah. Yeah, no problem. Thank you for watching. I challenge you to do 100 squats. Okay, at what weight? Are we doing like body weight squats? Am I supposed to do them all at once? I need more than that. Body weight. Yeah. Yeah, that's no big deal. I did Squat-tober. It's middle of November and it feels like we're still squatting. So it's fine. I could do that. I'm not going to do it right now because I already worked out. Yeah, your son didn't want any part of it and you had to pay your daughter to eat it. Man, that was the easiest money your daughter ever made, though. I'm glad she tried them. I hope she got a pin. Otherwise, tell her to come back next year and come back early, and hopefully you can get a pin. Anyways, okay, let me go back to my questions that I'm backlogged for 6 months on. Sorry about it. Okay, what media is in your laying bins? I tried some with topsoil and they laid, but it seems dry below the top surface. Oh, you didn't get a pin. Sorry. Yeah, we only gave out 300 of those pins a day, and they were gone by like 1 o'clock every day. On the weekends, they were gone by like 11. So I will maybe bump it to 400 pins a day next year. But it's one of those things you got to come early if you're going to get your pin, because next time. We'll make it happen. Okay, sorry. This is hard managing both at the same time. But so the media that I use in my laying bins, in my breeding trays, it is damp peat moss. And it's organic peat moss. So make sure if you're going to end up breeding them, do not use a peat moss with some sort of fertilizer in it. You are going to end up with no babies if you have fertilizer in the peat moss. I used topsoil before because they were out of peat moss. I guess apparently that is like a really seasonal thing. And so peat moss is not carried all the time. So there was, I think it was the first or second winter I was doing it. I went to go get some peat moss and they didn't have any, and they weren't getting any more until the spring. So I ended up having to just use what I could, and topsoil was what they had. I don't like using topsoil because it, A, does not hold the moisture as well, and B, when it dries, it like dries into freaking cement. Whereas peat moss, when it dries, it's like really fluffy. So I like the peat moss because it retains the moisture really well. They lay into it really well, and it's just my preferred. I know there's some people in Southeast Asia, so like the Thais and things like that, they use sand and then they actually sift the eggs out and like incubate. It's quite the process. So that's an option as well. There's a lot of different mediums you can use. Like I said, peat moss is what I like. There's people who use coconut coir because they think it's more sustainable. I don't know about that. Also, the salt content in the coconut coir ends up being somewhat of a problem on occasion as well. So just use whatever is available to you and whatever's easiest to you. I personally prefer and like peat moss. I don't reuse it. It's cheap enough, although it is freaking doubled in price in the last 18 months. Love that. I typically use peat moss all the time just because it works the best. And I don't reuse it because too many things can go wrong. That being said, over the winter, I might be more apt or more inclined to reuse it. I just set it outside and let it get a really hard freeze before I bring it back in and use it again. Okay, next one. Sorry, I'm getting to the mean people on the internet comments because I've had a lot of mean people. That's all right. Okay, so question again. How big are my containers in liters? I don't know, but in gallons, they're 50 gallons. And I would say, like I said, same rule, 0.6 pounds per square foot of growing area is a good rule to go with. What's a better heat source for the cricket eggs, heating pad or heating lamp? So I don't have experience with either of these. No, I cannot do 100 body weight squats right now. Sorry, not happening. With the heating pad or a heating lamp. So heating pad makes me nervous because you're actually contact with the hot surface. I feel like that puts the bottom at risk from literally cooking. But then similar with the heating lamp, same thing from the top. I use space heaters just so that I have an ambient temperature of what it is. If you have that option, that's the way I would go. The rest of it, I don't know about that. Sorry. I have a lot of conspiracy theorist comments that I have to deal with. I'm trying to find the other ones. Is there any way to dry the crickets without a dehydrator? My hedgehog is picky, but cricket powder may dupe the cutie. Cool. Hedgehogs, I think, actually do eat crickets. They're very good for them. Is there a way to dry the crickets without a dehydrator? Yeah. I don't see why you couldn't dry them in the sun or anything like that. You could dry them in the oven. I imagine you could just leave them out and let them dry. I don't know how that would probably smell pretty bad for a few days until they dry out. And I don't know that you'd want to be feeding them to your hedgehog at that point. Lots of different options there. Sun-dried crickets. Although if you're going to do the sun-dried crickets, make sure they're covered because the birds will come steal them. I got my daughter a bearded dragon, but I'm thinking of setting up something like this to save money. I only have a small shed outside with no power and fairly dark. Do you think it could still work or would it be too dark for them? So actually the darkness, not a problem for the crickets. They don't mind the darkness at all. The thing that I would worry about with what that person has described is I would be worried about the temperature. You do need to keep the crickets warm. I raise the Southeast Asian native house crickets. They do not survive and or thrive in anything under about 73, 75 degrees. So yeah, that would be my only hesitation on that. You need to have a warm environment. Don't worry about the darkness. That's fine. So if you want to put them in a closet or something, also not a big deal. All right, I think this is going to be the last question I'm going to do. So breeding my first batch was simple. I moved the pinheads to an aquarium, which was a bad idea. Kept them in a grow tent, seeing a bunch of escapees. Any advice? So I wouldn't put them in an aquarium. I would expect escapees because the baby crickets just can get out anywhere, and it's just what happens. You can try some packing tape around the top of whatever your container is. That sort of deters them as long as it doesn't get dusty. The pinheads typically can't crawl across it. If you're putting it, I don't like aquariums in general for them because it would require you to put some sort of substrate on the bottom more than likely. And you don't need a substrate. That causes more problems and more issues than it's worth. But you do need some sort of housing. So you need something like egg flats or cardboard or something for them to crawl around and hide on. Otherwise, you are going to have a whole bunch of cannibalism. They're not going to do very well. They need housing. They need shelter. Food, water, shelter is essential. So yeah, I think that's all I'm going to do on the questions. I'm sorry that I'm not going to do your 100 body weight squats right now. Maybe next time, but probably not. I don't know how often I'm going to do these lives. I've been really bad about uploading YouTube videos onto my YouTube channel because I've been over on TikTok and everywhere else where short form video is, and just doing some short form video things. I will, now that majority of market season is over, we'll start looking at getting back into the longer form YouTube stuff, doing some extended versions of things that people seem to be really curious about, and seeing where we can go from there. So thank you for being nice, people of the internet. Mean people of the internet have been around a lot lately. And like I said, I'll try and do this more regularly. Just one of those things as schedule allows and everything else. I need to work on the lighting situation in here. I can't believe how much better my phone video is than my computer video. It's astounding. Anyways, all right. Thank you guys for watching. I will see you next time. As always, if you have questions, drop them in the comments. I will get to them eventually, although I've been really bad about getting back to them lately. So have a great day. I'm going to end the stream there.